It's time for another boss guide, and it's the Dreaming General's turn today. If you had asked me yesterday who the second easiest boss is with great rewards, I would have undoubtedly answered the Dreaming General. But after playing 2 runs of Darkest Dungeon 2 in the 1.0 branch today, I can say unequivocally that the Dreaming General is no slouch anymore and has a significant amount of challenge to him and is worth talking about. So, without further ado, let's dive into the Dreaming General. As a bit of a PSA, because it proved out in my runs today, winning boss fights is one of the best indicators of a successful run in my book above nearly everything else. You can build great teams, but if you're not getting the trinkets, the mastery, the baubles, and the relics that come from lair bosses, you're going to have a hard time. So winning boss fights is important, and that's what these guides are designed to do. But without further ado, the Dreaming General. Locked in his nightmare slumber, he is tortured by failures both real and imagined. The Dreaming General weighs in at 185 health. Noteworthy resists are relatively low blight and fire resist, relatively high debuff resist, and 50% death's door, which can make him kind of a pain to kill. He only gets 1 action per turn. He generally makes that action count, and he has a speed of 3, so he's not the fastest boy on the block. The setup for this fight is pretty simple. You have a 3-size enemy who is the general in ranks 1 through 3, and then behind him is his taproot in rank 4, which is an invulnerable unit that you need to interact with in order to drive some of the mechanics of the fight that we will talk about. The other notable part of the beginning of the fight is that there will be vine growth that occurs above each one of your heroes. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see an image of the vine. They are normally vertical, but this infographic didn't make that particularly easy to do. And the numbers indicate levels of growth. All of the vines will start with only the 0 portion showing, and then they have 2 stages of growth after that, 1 and 2, where the vine will kind of shift down towards your players, and we'll talk more about what happens when that happens. But let's take a step back and talk about his moves. I think the general has one of the easiest move sets to understand. The mechanics are a little more complicated, but the moves are pretty straightforward. Unsettling Whispers is his standard attack. Anytime that he cannot do Walking Dead, he will do Unsettling Whispers. It is a stress and damage attack. It does 6 to 10 damage, and it does 2 stress to a primary hero plus 1 additional stress at a 50% chance to the rest of the heroes, even if it misses on the primary hero, which can be rather annoying. This means that on average, this attack is dealing out 3.5 damage of stress, which is pretty rough when you think about it. So stress is definitely a factor in this fight. Then you have Walking Dead, and Walking Dead is an attack that ignores taunt. It does 10 to 20 damage. Big numbers there. It also applies 4 bleed. And as I said, not only does it ignore taunt, it also ignores stealth and blind. So Walking Dead is pretty nasty. This is the main driver of this fight kind of shifting into the realm of being more of a race against time fight rather than being a kind of straightforward walk in the park as it previously was. He then has a version of Walking Dead that is whole party wide that takes place when all of your heroes are strangled. We'll talk about strangulation in a second, but it also does 10 to 20 damage, not something fun. His taproot will also be doing some things, but I'm only going to cover kind of like the very basics here, and we'll talk more about it in the mechanics section. These 2 parts are going to blur together a little bit. But basically, the taproot is the thing that will drive growth of the vines. Every turn, 2 of the vines are going to progress 1 step closer. So if they are at 0, they will progress to 1. If they are at 1, they will progress to 2. When you hit the taproot, you will reset one of the vines back to 0, but you will also add the root icon to the taproot. And then last but not least, Soil Stirs is going to apply the little sapling icon to 2 of your heroes. It does respect taunt, and it can only be used when there are 3 of the root icons on the taproot. So how do all of these things interplay and make sense? Let's talk about the mechanics. So first of all, we have the growth mechanic. We've already talked about this a little bit, but basically every turn, 2 vines are going to grow. And they will grow towards your heroes. And if it gets to them, the next thing is going to happen, which is strangulation. If a hero is affected by a 2 growth vine, they will lose their turn and they will be forced to do a kind of like placeholder action, kind of like the Harvest Child's Hunger ability. What that ability does is it's going to stress out the rest of the team with a 75% chance to apply 1 stress to all of your other heroes. Strangulation is very bad news because losing hero actions is never good for business. So how do you prevent this? The short answer is by hitting the taproot. You push back growth by using any skill, either a targetable item, a AoE item, area of effect, that is, or an ability that hits rank 4. Every time you hit the taproot, you will push back the growth of one of the vines. That means if someone is being strangled, you'll potentially free them up. The thing that is important to note is that this is not deterministic, which means that when you push back the growth, you have no idea who is going to get freed up. So if you had a hero with 2 growth on them and another hero with 1 growth on them, you could hit the taproot and push back the growth on the 1 growth hero rather than the one who is being strangled. So the last component here is stirring soil. So you're pushing back growth, This is generating root icons on the taproot. And once those root icons reach 3, the taproot then has the option to apply stirring soil, which in turn allows the general to do Walking Dead, which we have discussed is the big, scary, awful thing that we definitely don't want him doing because we can't mitigate it with blind, we can't mitigate it with stealth. So with that, I think we are ready to graduate into the strategy portion of the discussion. I think you basically understand the mechanics. We have stuff growing down. We need to push back the stuff that's growing down. We push back the stuff that's growing down. We're going to get hit harder, so on and so forth. But at a 10,000 foot view, what is the deal with this fight? The short version is you need to keep the growth at bay with hits that hit rank 3 and 4. Combat items can also push back the growth while allowing you to maintain the flexibility to do more damage to the boss. In terms of our 6-element rubric for talking about these bosses, I think Taunt is relatively valuable because you have Unsettling Whispers coming in and you want to be able to kind of like build up stress on one hero and do some like high efficiency stress heals on them. Healing is surprisingly important because Walking Dead is going to be hitting your heroes whether you like it or not. Even if you put up Taunt, you're probably going to get 1 Walking Dead for 10 to 20 hitting your Alchemist, Plague Doctor, or something like that. Stress is surprisingly high for how few actions this particular boss has. This is a fight that often, if I am unprepared or start to fall behind, I will have meltdowns on. Dot Cure is significantly more important now that Walking Dead is dropping what is, I think, the largest bleed or one of the largest bleeds that you can possibly get in the game at 4 bleed. Tokens aren't particularly important. He doesn't put out any tokens of note, but there are the Stoil Stirs icon and those types of things that you need to understand just in terms of the flow of the game. And overall, in terms of lethality, I've put him at a 4.5. I think the Dreaming General is still very manageable, but is a tougher proposition when we're talking about going after them in the first region. So let's talk more about the strategy overview. I think there are a few key components that you need to be wrestling with. The first of which is managing growth. Every single turn, you are going to see 2 vines grow, and you are going to need to ask yourself, am I going to push back all of that growth? If I push back all of that growth, how many root icons am I going to give to the taproot? And then if I don't push back the growth, what are the chances that one of my heroes might lose their turn next time? And if that happens, how fast is the hero that's losing their turn next time? Once you've answered all these questions, you'll come to a basic answer, which is how much growth do I need to push back? On average, you want to be pushing back 2 growth per turn, but there is sometimes some value to delaying some of that push between turns in order to prevent some early walking deaths or lessen the number, which brings us to the next piece of the strategy overview, which is the Walking Dead trade-off. So if you end your turn with 1 growth, right, on one vine. So 3 vines are at 0, 1 vine is at 1. You then get 2 growth. You have the potential for one of your heroes to be strangled. This is obviously bad, but if you can push back that growth before the hero's turn, it's kind of a no harm, no foul type of situation. There's no real lasting impact. They don't take any stress until they have to do the mandatory action and lose their turn. So what this means is that you want to think about when is the general going in the turn order and also when is the taproot going in the turn order, and how much work do I want to do before or after those actions in order to avoid as many walking deaths as possible. So to give you an example of the way this might work, let's say you are in a turn and you currently have 2 growth, you have 2 heroes going before and 2 heroes going after. The taproot already has 2 out of 3 soil stirs, which means that if the taproot were to go right now, nothing would happen. You wouldn't get soil stirs. You wouldn't get walking deaded. That means that your heroes later in the turn order pushing back the growth would be advantageous because the roots cannot go beyond 3. So the idea is, and I know this is getting a little convoluted, but the idea is you want to push back as much growth as possible while stacking additional tokens on the taproot that it can't use. Now, this is a trade-off because if you aren't careful, you could end up getting, say, strangulation on your fastest hero, not have enough time to push back the growth, and end up losing a turn, and losing a turn is losing tempo, and that is pain. So it's a very delicate balance, but the way that I like to think about it is generally if most of my heroes have some type of combat item that can push back growth, I like to either at the beginning of the turn, immediately push back the growth if the taproot is already going to do soil stirs, or wait until after the taproot goes and then try and get 4 pushbacks at the end of the turn and the beginning of the next one. In terms of dealing with stress and healing, I think that the reason that I'm calling this out is not because you need to do it. I think that's relatively obvious. Everyone knows if your stress is getting out of control or you're running low on hit points, you need to fix those things. The issue here is that I find that the heroes that I am often using to either deal with stress or healing are also heroes that I need to be pushing back the growth. And what this means is that I lose tempo on that other thing. So generally speaking, like let's say it's an occultist or a plague doctor, I'm going to be missing out on a plague grenade or a sealing spaghetti in order to be able to put out a heal or a stress heal, potentially. The stress heal might be coming from a man-at-arms who needs to be doing something else, or the like. But the short version is that as the fight progresses and you have to do more stress healing and healing, you are often going to be missing opportunities to either DPS the boss, or you're going to be missing opportunities where you need to push back the growth. What this leads to is kind of like a crunch at the end of the fight, where you're going to have more and more things that you need to be doing. You need to be pushing back more and more growth. The growth is getting a little out of control, etc. So one thing that usually happens at the end of these fights is I reach a point where I'm like in full send mode. I stop focusing on growth entirely and I just start burning down the boss because I think I'm going to get it killed before the vine growth gets to me. The last thing to talk about here is, this is true of all of the bosses, but I think it is doubly true of the general. Preparation is key here. Having items that allow you to push back the growth flexibly on most of your heroes can be hugely effective because it opens you up to be able to use DPS to maintain your tempo in the fight, which is critically important. If I can choose to heal with my Plague Doctor, because I know that my Plague Doctor has a linseed oil and can still push back the growth, then all I'm missing out on is the dot tempo on the general. But more than anything, I think worthy of note is that this fight is much more of a DPS race than it used to be. Walking Dead, even if properly managed, is just putting out a lot of damage. As a reminder, a Alchemist Plague Doctor with no quirks and no trinkets or anything like that has 22 hit points. That means that if they get hit with a Walking Dead, they are potentially on 2 HP with a 4 HP bleed. That is not something that you can ignore. So you really need to be moving quickly, and you really need to hope for a bit of good RNG when it comes to the soil stirs landing on the right people. But with that kind of out of the way, let's talk about stars and skills, because I think that there are some clear winners here. First off, Plague Grenader, amazing. Plague Doctor and Occultist are both exceptional. In tandem, they are double exceptional. I love having Plague Grenade and Sealing Spaghetti to be able to push back 2 growth in a turn while still dealing damage to the general. I really like Point Blank Shot on the Highwayman just because it's easy frontline damage. You can get some nice juggles going. If you say have a man-at-arms, you can do strategic withdrawal and just keep doing that. It's nice big damage. I think the Leper is an exceptional option here because I think Chop is relatively high damage. It's relatively easy to keep combo up on the general so you're not missing them due to blind. But most importantly, Intimidate allows you to concentrate stress on the Leper, which is great because of Solemnity, but also Intimidate can hit the Taproot, which is fantastic, and the Leper is slow, which means that you can often do it after the Soil Stirs has been avoided. So let's say you have the Taproot at 2 root icons, you need to push back 1 more stress, you can do it with the Leper at the end of the turn, and then open up the next turn with an Abyssal Artillery plus a Plague Grenade, push back a ton of growth, and still only end up with 1 Soil Stirs. The Jester is exceptional just because I think the single target stress healing coupled with something like a Leper or a Man-at-Arms with Taunt can be really good. In terms of duds, the Hellion and the Grave Robber both just struggle from the same problem, which is that they basically, if they want to push back the growth, their only actions are single target. Like you can Poison Dart the Taproot, that's not going to do you much good. You can Iron Swan the Taproot with the Hellion, but that's not great. I think the Hellion also struggles from the fact that this is a relatively high HP fight, and as a result, you're potentially struggling a bit because the Hellion is a bit more burst damage focused rather than sustain. In terms of the ranks, the damage and the stress is kind of everywhere on this fight in terms of what the general is doling out. And ideally, you want to be able to put out a lot of damage in rank 1, a lot of damage in rank 4, and a little bit of damage in rank 3 so you get some of that splash. To talk about preparation briefly here, I think linseed oil is still king. It stacks to 4, it allows you to push back the growth. If you pick up some linseed oil, it's relatively cheap. You toss it on a Plague Doctor and they can single-handedly for an entire fight keep the growth at bay relatively flexibly. I think Healing Salve is another fantastic pickup here just because, as we discussed, you're going to have people approaching or getting close to death's door. It's nerve-wracking to say the least. Mineral Rich Spring Water, great stress healing, ability to take people off death's door, we love it. And then a bunch of AoE items like Spore Grenade, Crow's Feet, and Greek Fire are going to be useful because they're going to do a bit of splash damage / dot damage to the general, while also giving you the flexibility to occasionally push back growth. The only thing I would say about them is focus on using them when the growth needs pushing back, more so than just popping them at the beginning of the fight to get as much damage as possible. In terms of notable drops, I think both of the general's trophies are particularly useful. The 75% reduction in trinket cost is very nice, highly useful. You can get lots of trinkets out of that. Reverberating Redoubt is exceptional. If you can get a tank with 2 speed, you're getting a lot of extra actions. It is actually the single best trinket for taunt uptime, in my opinion, for any given hero. Reverberating Redoubt on a Leper or Man-at-Arms is absolutely delightful. And then the other trophy of the general is just kind of very unique. It locks all of your heroes in place, and as a result allows juggle comps to kind of go infinite, for lack of a better descriptor. You can have a Jester in rank 3 spamming Fade to Black until they're blue in the face, a Grave Robber in rank 3 lunging until the cows come home. So overall, the general is still a very doable fight. I think it is a harder proposition for a region 1. I'm just going to go take out the general, although I did that today, so it's definitely doable. But you need to have a plan. You need to be like, I've bought the right items. I know that I can push back the growth. I know that I can take care of this. Otherwise, this fight is really going to sneak up on you, and you're going to find yourself getting more and more of your heroes strangled, potentially. You're going to lose control of it. You're going to fall behind because you have to do a bunch of healing, and he's just going to put out a ton of damage, and you're going to have some meltdowns and a generally bad time. Har har, generally. So As with these videos, I'm going to do the same thing that I usually do, which I'm going to leave you with a couple of fights, not all of which have gone perfectly. I think I'm going to give you 2 fights this time, both of the ones that I did today because they have the new general. So you'll get a feel for the good, the bad, and the ugly. One of them went not particularly well. One of them went pretty swimmingly. But for now, that's it for me. If you like these type of guides, I'm going to be doing them for all 5 confession bosses now that I've seen them. I'm going to be doing them for all 4 lair bosses, and those will all be coming in the coming days. So if you're excited about that, toss me a subscription so that you see them when they in your inbox when they go live. Toss a like on this video if it was helpful, and there's a link to the infographics in their full glory down below. But for now, enjoy me taking down the general a couple of times. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Here we go. This is going to be a This is going to be an interesting one. The general has changed. General's max HP has decreased to 185.
The enemy weakens and wanes.
Now this is also for. All right, let's hit you with the firebomb. Ooh, the resist on the firebomb is a bit of a shocker. Ouch. So the goal is to get our blind tokens gone. Okay, so for first turn here, we use double encore. Or encore into double play grenade to get the growth removed. Yoba, we didn't have the ability to unlock it because the Altar of Hope was not available on our first go around because it reset our game. So that's okay. We'll get it on the second go. We could have reset the run, but we would have killed 4 of our heroes, which I don't think is particularly a good idea. Okay, we're doing this so that if we absolutely need it, we won't have blinds stacked up here. Okay, I like the block token here for reasons. Let's see. I don't think unupgraded take aim is worth doing right now. Oh. Yep, you were the one with the caltrops. Alright, good thing we have the Intimidate here to push back the growth, because I goofed that one up slightly by not using the crow's feet. Wow. That was something. A lot of damage on our highwayman.
The fiend's strength dwindles.
A little nervous about that because we don't have. Well, I guess we can get the heal off. Because we can use Intimidate to push back the growth.
Anxiety foments insidious fears.
Yeah, Walking Dead having a dot of size 4 now is going to be a big difference maker, for sure. The general is also a Greenpeace activist. Sounds about right. Let's see. Does it show your cooldown here? It does not. Does it show your cooldown in here? It does not. That would have been a nice change. Let's see. I think we want to go for maximum damage here, so I am going to use the caltrops.
Measured and steady. Cooperation is the key.
Let's see. I think we're gonna have to hold off on
The enemy weakens and
stress healing. Oof. Man, that is substantial. I think we got to do it despite the badness here.
Generosity.
Yeah, it's a bummer that we took the negative hit there, but let's see. Yeah, the new Walking Dead is substantial. We're running out of dots here, which is scary. Those meddling activists. This is going to give us an opportunity to do Solemnity on you. You're potentially going to be on death's door just from a Walking Dead, which is not my favorite. So Walking Dead is also happening more frequently now. This is interesting. I'm going to need to figure out exactly what's going on here. So Walking Dead is enabled by the amount of times you hit the taproot, and it seems like you're at 12 hit points. We're going to go for the kill here. This might be a little greedy of us, but
The mind's grasp grows tenuous.
I believe his death's door was increased. Yeah, it looks like it. All right, well, live to fight another day, but that was the general is a lot scarier than it used to be, for sure. I like the Reverberating Redoubt here a lot. We have more ways to debuff speed now, but the general is going to be a little annoying.
He has retreated, undying, into a dream, and there he must stay.
Annoying place for that to go, but we're gonna save the bear traps because that's part of my solution for the growth.
Excellent work.
Good hit. Where is this blind coming from? Do you have... Oh, you have missed the mark. I see. All right, well, let's see if we get this. Okay, I'm only going to push back the growth once to try and lessen the chances of soil stirring too soon. If we get unlucky, it'll be a bit unfortunate, but
Cooperation is the key.
you don't have... Yeah, she... For some reason, why is... Oh, so they've broken something. So they changed it so that when the vines grow, it doesn't cause her to generate conviction. But it appears that they have completely broken her conviction generation. Have a good night, Hama. You're probably dead. I apologize in advance, but... Life do be that way sometimes. Do I want to push back the last? Yeah, probably. I think we... Yeah, we get a Walking Dead. Yep. That's what you want to avoid. For as long as possible. I want to avoid anybody getting locked up, so I'm gonna push that, even though I think it means we take one more Walking Dead this turn, potentially. Actually, I think the taproot needs to be at 3 to do Walking Dead. So, okay, so we are gaining conviction. How strange. Oh, I was like, uh-oh. We broke him. This general went a lot better than the last one. Still a bit of stress that we need to clean up, but...
Sweet reprieve. Until the next test is put before you.